in Diller, Nebraska, February the 3rd, 1908, to Willie and Carrie Riddle. My father worked for the railroad, the Burlington Line Railroad. She was a homemaker. I had two brothers. My oldest brother was 3 years older than I, and the second brother was just a little over 2 years older than I. It was fun for me because I was young enough to play was about all I did. I had cousins there, and aunts and uncles, and my grandmother, and so I remember all of them. My aunt and uncle that lived the closest to us had 13 children. My dad rented a small farm, and he had a corn sheller that he run part of the time. Well, we were at I don't know whose place it was, but my grandma had her mare and colt in the pasture there, and my uncle, not realizing that they were there, sent my oldest brother out to drive the cows in, and Clifford and I started following, and of course Clifford had polio and was crippled enough that he couldn't move very fast, and I think I started going out in the pasture first before my uncle saw us, and Clifford come running to get me, and he kept saying, "Run, Wanda, run," and the colt saw us and come towards us, got to us and kicked with both back wheels, both back feet, and caught each one, and caught Clifford with one foot, me with the other one. And my uncle said we just went up in the air and came down. And when he got to us, we were covered with blood and both unconscious. And so they had quite a time. He got one of us under one arm and one under the other. Just went running towards the house, and his wife and my mother and my aunt saw him coming, and they ran out, and all three of them fainted. And so I heard them tell so many times, here he was with two children unconscious and blood all over, and three women had fainted. So that he had an exciting time for a while. It was a Stanley Steamer was the first car I saw. My uncle bought a used one, which to me, when I saw it, it looked like 4 wheels and a gas tank, which I didn't realize what the gas tank was. And I think the seat was on the top of the gas tank, and it was a car that scared all the horses on the road to death, and yet it was a modern era of when I saw the first car was before I was 6 years old. I'm not sure what year that my uncle got that car. I do remember that his mother was aggravated with him because he bought a car to scare the horses. I was almost 6 years old, and I can't remember what year that would have made me. Born in 8, 9, 11, 12, 14, 14, 1914, evidently. I think it was October, the month that we moved to Oklahoma. My dad he quit working for the railroad, and my aunt and uncle had come from Oklahoma to Nebraska to visit, and come in a covered wagon, and my dad and mother, we 3 kids, went back to Oklahoma with them, all of us in the covered wagon. As I remember, there's a herd We bought milk from the farmers along the way, and vegetables and things that different farmers had for sale. We bought along the way. Well, it was all new, and we lived with Uncle John and Aunt Mamie for, I think, maybe two months before my dad found a place for us to live. And then later he bought a farm, and we lived just across the field from my aunt and uncle. So we kids all played together all through the years. There were lots of, we called them hobos, that came by asking for food and offering to work for food and a place to sleep, or sometimes just knocking on the door and asking for something to eat. She never turned them away. Maybe we didn't have a whole lot to eat, but we shared what we had with them. It was a country school where all 8 grades were in one room. And about the first year or two that I went, well, it was more than that, it was after my dad bought the farm. I went all through school, and there were around 50 to 54 students and 1 teacher, and 8 different grades. My father always enjoyed movies, and he used to, in the summertime, we would go to a movie, a town 8 miles away. He'd load us into the spring wagon with 2 horses on, and put bedding in for we kids to sleep on the way home. And we'd go and see the movie, that was a very short movie, but it was really fun to see, as I remember as a kid, because so many kids that went to school with me had never seen a movie. My dad got his first radio when I was, I think, maybe in the 7th or 8th grade, and it was a fancy one. You had to listen to it with an earphone. Only 2 people could listen to the radio at a time, but neighbors all come in, take turns listening to the radio for a little while. I started driving when I was 14. My mother asked my father one day to go to the store and get a loaf of bread. We were living in town at that time, and my dad looked at me and he said, "Wanda, you get in the car and go get the bread for your mother. I know you've been driving." I guess I was just like the preteens and teens are today. I went to the store. No, I don't think that I was gone very long, because I had to go back up down the driveway to get out of away from the house in the car, and there was a tree on either side of the driveway at the end of it, and that was my first time of backing up in a car, and that was quite exciting. I played basketball. I was on the basketball team. We was the first team from that small town to ever go to the state tournaments. We lost the finals, but we at least got to go to the tournament. I was teaching school. I started teaching schools just as I graduated from high school. In a school about 18 miles from Gage, and it was quite a ways. 18 miles was quite a long ways to have to go from home to when you'd never been away from home, because I didn't get to come home every night. I had to stay down there, rented a room, and with a farm family that lived there. There were 8 grades, but not all of them had a student in them. Some of them had 2 students, and some of them had 3, each class. And each class would have, I would call the class that I wanted to recite, and they would come forward and sit at the front of the class. So all the pupils got to get the information that each grade was talking about, or what they were doing. So maybe that was a little better than the way we teach now. I know the discipline was, in that day and time, students had high respect for their teacher, and they were very easy to control. Occasionally there was a problem because a 16 or 18-year-old farm boy going to school with a small, petite teacher, sometimes discipline did get to be a problem, but not much. I was married in December the 29th, 1926. I married Troy Harrell, a farmer boy. He was living on a farm out of town, different direction from where we were, and I hadn't met him until he came to school. And for my first year in high school, I graduated from 8th grade in a little country school. And then I went on to high school in the town of Gage. Yes, the minister of the Methodist Church, where we had attended church and Sunday school, is where we were married. We went to church when weather permitted, but so much of the time, you know, when you're living 8 miles from town and have to go to town with horse and buggy or in a wagon, you go when the weather permits. But it was always fun. We attended church when we could. We rented a house to live in when we were first married, and it was quite a long ways from where I was teaching. But in the fall we rented a farm. My husband was going to be a farmer, and sometimes I'm a little forgetful. I don't know why. My oldest son was born at my other's home in Gage, Oklahoma. A friend of mine, her husband and she were teaching in a 2-room school, and he took a job in Montana, and she stayed there in Oklahoma, and they hired me to finish out the year, which was 3 months that I taught after Bill was born. We had moved to a farm near Shattuck, Oklahoma, when my second son was born. In that day and time, it would cost $35 to have the baby delivered. And when Gary was born, we didn't have any money, and the doctor was a farmer. I'd owned a farm, so we traded him 2 pigs for Gary. And Gary always told everybody that he was worth 2 pigs when he was born. Linda was born in 1939 at Shattuck, Oklahoma, in the hospital. The first one of my babies to be born in the hospital. Bill and Gary attended school in Shattuck until we moved to eastern Oklahoma. We moved to eastern Oklahoma when Gary was in the 2nd grade, I believe. And Linda was 5 years old, probably 4 or 5 years old. Didn't care for eastern Oklahoma. It was too rainy, and red soil, which was almost like quicksand in places. And we raised cotton, which I'm not a cotton farmer. I got real sick when I was in eastern Oklahoma. I developed malaria, and I was sick most of the time. We lived there, but I finally got over it to a certain degree. Malaria always stays in your system after you once get it. We lived 18 miles from Muskogee, Oklahoma, in Oklahoma, and my youngest daughter, Karen, was born in Muskogee, so she's the original Okie from Muskogee. The farmhouse that we moved into, heaven forbid that anybody would ever have to move in another. It had grain stored in it for 2 or 3 years before we moved over there. And there were bed bugs in the house. When I found that out, I went crying to my neighbor lady and asked her what I could do. And she said, "Oh, everybody has bed bugs over here, but we just fight them all the time." So they told me what to do, how to burn sulfur in the house to get rid of them. But from that day on, I never liked that place. The Dust Bowl and the tornadoes in Oklahoma were so bad. Our farm had nearly all blown away, and we were lucky to have money enough to get out of the country. And I can still see those horrible black dust storms that went through Oklahoma and blew the country to pieces, ruining all the crops. We left Oklahoma. We sold the farm that we had bought over there. We sold the farm, and in 1943, and moved to Idaho. We came to Idaho in a 1939 Chevrolet. There was my husband and I, 4 children, the youngest just 7 months old, and my mother. It took us 4 days to get from Oklahoma to Idaho in that day and time, because we had to drive fairly slow, lots of dirt roads. But I'm so glad that we came. We had family in Idaho. My uncle and his family had lived here for years, and my brother had moved out, and my dad and mother had moved here before we came. My husband and I moved out, and my brother was a cook in a cafe in downtown Nampa, and my father had passed away when we moved out here, but my mother and my brother were still living here when we came into town. Life was hard in those days. When we first came out, we went to work in packing shed where they were packing and shipping vegetables and fruits. And then my husband bought a truck, and he started hauling produce. And in the wintertime, he hauled slab wood and sold it to keep us going during the winter. But we stuck it out and did pretty good. When we first came to Nampa, we rented a house, and we had money enough that to make a down payment on a house. But my husband never wanted to make the payment on the house because he was always in hopes that we'd move back to Oklahoma. And I was just as much in hopes that we would never go back to Oklahoma. We always attended the Methodist church My mother was a very staunch Methodist, and we always attended the Methodist church. But after I'd been in Nampa for a while, I started attending another church, and I finally joined the First Christian Church, and I think it was maybe much to my mother's sorrow that I didn't continue as a true Methodist. My uncle was a Methodist minister for a number of years. I began teaching a Sunday school class shortly after I started going to the Christian church. And I taught 25 years as a 7th grade Sunday school teacher. And after that, I substituted as a teacher in different grades. And then I began teaching an adult class and taught the adult class until I don't know how many years. But then I started teaching other classes, and as long as I was able, I did teach a class in some department. The last teaching that I did was in a study called The People of the Covenant, and it was an adult class, and I taught that for possibly 4 or 5 years before it got to where I wasn't able to drive and get there every time like I should. I'm not able to go to church, only occasionally. My hearing is bad and my eyesight is bad. I told the minister when he was here the other day that it was much easier to get the tape of the sermon. That way I could stop at any time I didn't understand what he said and play it again. He said, well, you come on to church and you just wave your hand and say, whoa, wait a minute. I'll ask you to repeat that again. I said, well, that might interrupt the class somewhere or the study some way, so I better not do that. I was in the group that started the prayer chain. We started, I don't know what year it was, but we felt there was a need for prayer for anyone who needed it. All they had to do was call one person, and that person would call another, until each one in the group was praying for whatever it was that they needed. And I can still do that. I don't have to leave home to pray. I have 4 children. I have 13 grandchildren. I have 21 great grandchildren. And I had 6 great grandchildren, and all of a sudden they kept coming so quick, so fast. I'm not sure the exact number now, because I think I had 3 new ones this summer. So 6, I probably have 22 or 23 great grandchildren. Just one of my grandchildren, I was able to cut the cord of this child, and it always made me feel maybe especially close to this baby all of her life. Well, you know, when you got a big family, yes, you're a midwife and a doctor and everything else. Yes, what I would really like to do is to be able to serve the Lord more fully. I'm sure there's much more that I could have done through the years. And to know that you're still able to do that, to serve God and serve Him faithfully. I have traveled quite a bit, but there's no place like home. I enjoyed my life, all of it. There was lots of bad times, but I had so many more good times. And yes, it'd be kind of fun to live it again, knowing what I know now. I would do so many things different. I'd like to share with my friends. I guess it would be going to church and working in the church and helping others at any time you can. What I'd like to share with my family is the fact that what my parents taught me as I was growing up. Be able to share with your friends and your neighbors and anyone who needs help. No matter what you have, you can always help in some way. And don't forget to show love and consideration. It helps you get through life.
grows sweeter and sweeter to me, the closer I live to Him. And the more of His goodness and mercy I see, the closer I live to Him. Closer to Him, closer to Him, I want to live closer to Jesus. There's no one so precious, so faithful to me, and I want to live closer to Him. I long more and more in His likeness to be, the closer I live to Him. And surer I am that His face I shall see, the closer I live to Him. Closer to Him, closer to Him, I want to live closer to Jesus. There's no one so precious, so faithful